Fantastic. Well, let's begin. My name is Rick Taylor. I'm a senior technical architect with Proficient. I am a SharePoint guy, but before SharePoint came around, I was a network guy. And, all right now. Housekeeping rules. I understand if you have a cell phone, you must take the call. Fine. The exit doors are marked clearly, okay, if you must use your phone. Anyway, so as a network guy, I was concerned with trying to get resources on my network and keeping resources away from other people that didn't need access, which is kind of interesting in that SharePoint, the word share is in the middle or at the beginning. And we have to be worried about security because we just don't want to give everything to everyone. But security and collaboration, which SharePoint is very good at, are diametrically opposed. The more that we share, the less secure that we are. The more secure we are, the less that we can collaborate. So that unique problem or challenge that we have is what this discussion is going to be about. Where is the happy medium? Because it's different for every enterprise. Okay, some enterprises are very comfortable locking everything down and they have to come to Zeus on Mount Olympus to get a cookie. And then Zeus can deny them or whatever, and he feels good about himself, and the other person goes away weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth. And that's just the way it is. While other enterprises are a free-for-all, and they're okay with that. I'm not here to say whether one is good or bad. All I'm here to do is show you, for those of you that need to secure it more, what you can do to make your SharePoint infrastructures a little bit more secure. And I called this the 10 Immutable Laws of SharePoint Security, and I go down and I tried to pretend like I'm Moses, right? Here are the 10 commandments of SharePoint security. And it's not really SharePoint security because a lot of enterprises seem to treat SharePoint as this one-off beast that they have to manage. And I will say that that is an incorrect approach in that SharePoint is just part of your enterprise. It is an application, huge application, that sits on your network and needs to be treated as one of the family instead of the red-headed stepchild over there. And these are guidelines that you can use in order to not just secure SharePoint, but understand how security fits into your enterprise so that SharePoint is more secure. So, some of the questions, who is this guy up here talking about SharePoint security? I've never heard of this guy before or whatever. Well, I used to work for Microsoft. I worked on the SharePoint BPOS, as it was called. Now it's called SharePoint Online, Office 365, or whatever have you. But we were a group of people that sat in this office and we engineered solutions. Some of my clients were Coca-Cola and Nokia. And so they would come to us and say, Microsoft, build us a SharePoint infrastructure that does this, 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 and this. And we would go into our cave and then hack it all out and present it to our customers. So that's what I did at Microsoft. I loved Microsoft. Seattle, I wasn't so happy about. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. So when you move from a sunny climate up to Seattle, Microsoft knows that we like go into shock because we never see the sun. And so they give us what is called a SAD light. And the SAD light wasn't working for me, so I had to go back to Phoenix because they didn't want a mass killer running around on Redmond. So, where are we going? All right, well, as a network guy and a security guy, I have found that as SharePoint, how many people here are SharePoint admins? Okay, a great number of you. When SharePoint doesn't work, which may be often sometimes, what's the first thing we do? Sometimes we go to the logs. Why isn't it working? Sometimes we look at the error messages that are on the screen. Sometimes we go to central admin. We're usually dealing with SharePoint to find out why it's not working. And I am here to assert that that could be an ineffective approach, in that there may be something else going on and you may be spinning your wheels. And a more effective approach would be to use the OSI model to troubleshoot. I don't only use the OSI model to secure my infrastructure, I use the OSI model to troubleshoot problems. I start at the bottom and work up. I can't get to this site. Well, let me go to IIS. You're dealing up here in level 7. Is your cable plugged in? Is DNS working? You know, is your domain controller authenticating? Move up the stack. Some of the things, yeah, I know that the thing is on because I can get to the internet, it's just not rendering the site. Well, that's cool, but you've used the OSI model to determine that because you've already eliminated what isn't the problem. So I'm here to suggest that the OSI model should be your guide when you are securing your SharePoint infrastructures. So we'll go through the OSI model. For some of you, that will be like a Wayback Machine flashback. And then we'll talk about why the OSI model should be used because of the attack surfaces. In other words, if there is a bad guy out there trying to wreck your SharePoint infrastructure, where are they going to attack? Where are they going to go? And then we'll say, okay, well, if we know where the bad guys are going to go, how do we prevent the bad guys from exploiting those problems? And that's where we're going to go. That's what this session is going to be about. Okay, so why? Security is more than just, when I was learning SharePoint 10 some other years ago, and you know, books were left and right, and you would read up on things, and you go to TechNet or whatever, and then they always talk about authorization and authentication. They would talk about permissions, and that's all fine and good because we do need to secure our content, which is sitting on SharePoint sites. No problem. Some people need to get access here, some people need to get access there, some people need access over all of that stuff. I get that. But it's more to it than that. Okay? There's more to security than just authorization and authentication. Okay? If I want to secure my infrastructure, I should be doing it like I'm dressing for the cold. I grew up in Chicago, so I understand about dressing for the cold. Now you know why I live in Phoenix. Okay? When it's cold, the first thing you want to do is put on one layer. Then you want to put on another layer. Then you want to put on another layer because the cold tries to penetrate. So they call that penetration in depth, okay? Penetration testing. How deep can I get in there? Security is not so much what I do to secure my infrastructure as much as it is why am I doing what I'm doing? Putting security on your infrastructure just to be putting security on your infrastructure is a bad thing because then you're going to create more problems than it's worth. Don't look at the possible causes, look at the probable causes. You know, where are they probably going to attack me? Not, well, you know, if they somehow got a key to the building and then found out which one of those servers was which one and they were able to get my admin login, you know what? Is it possible? Sure. But you know what? How much energy do you want to spend in doing that rather than, you know what? It's probably not going to happen that they get a key to the building. If they already have a key to the building, if they already know your username and access, and they're already into the server and they're hacking, you don't have a security problem. You have an HR problem. Okay? That's what needs to be dealt with. So let's deal with why am I securing it here? And how probable is it that they will do this? All right, so security is a nice big buzzword. So when we think about security and we think about probable causes or probable issues, there are a list of things that I've come up with that everybody's going to get a a snapshot, or they're going to get these slides, so I'm not going to go through every one of these bullet points, but just take a look at some of these things and understand that, you know, security is kind of like sausage. You don't really want to know about what is in the sausage. You just know that it tastes pretty good and it just comes from a happy place. Okay? That is pretty much where you want to be. All right, so let us get rolling. Okay, so the OSI model. 7 layers. Typically, we say that the top of the layer is application layer and the lowest layer is the physical layer. At least I like to visualize it that way because the cable that comes into my computer is on the ground typically, and so that's where layer 1 is. Okay, so the OSI stands for the Open Systems Interconnection Model. That's what OSI means. Okay, what is it? It is basically something that a group of people came up with from the IOS, which is the International Standardization Organization, right? You've heard of ISO? They came up with this. Okay, and then they said, okay, we're going to think of communications as in layers. Okay, and then whenever a computer is communicating with another computer, there's a layer of communication that happens. Something else happens which provides services to the next one, which provides services to the next one, all the way up until it gets to the computer, which is being requested, the services are being requested of it, and then it goes right back down the stack to give the services to the other computer. So that's how communication happens. Now, when we think about security, okay, each one of these individual layers has sublayers. And if I attack one of those sublayers, that's where where I start to compromise each one of those layers. And if I can compromise a layer that's lower than where you are, I've got you. It's kind of like the foundation. If I wreck the foundation of your house, the whole house comes down. If I wreck that first layer, the physical layer, it doesn't matter about everything else. Think about this, okay? And I'm going to go on to the next slide here real soon, but just think. If I steal your computer, what good does SharePoint do you? If I take it from you, it doesn't do you any good. Even if I don't know the admin account, who cares? You got no SharePoint. You got nothing. I may take your Exchange server. I may take your domain controller, right? If I take the physical thing from you, you're done. This was kind of a little argument that I used to be the AD guy when I worked for Nestle, and I sat across from the network guys, and we would argue about who's got more power. I got more power than you. I'll just shut you out of the network. I'll just take away your, but so I would be doing my work, and then all of a sudden my network would drop, and I couldn't send email, and he'd start laughing. I'm like, okay. As soon as my network came up, and he was all happy that he had, proven that he was almighty and powerful, I locked his account. Then he couldn't take me off the network, and I said, and we went on and on and on and things like that. So, the lower you are, the more power you've got. Okay? So, law 1. If a bad guy has unrestricted physical access to your stuff, it no longer belongs to you. Okay? It's mine. So, how do we prevent the bad guys? Okay? So, let's talk about layer 1. What is it? It's the actual machine. Okay? Protect the machine. Where is the machine at? If it's under somebody's desk and they kick it, or kick the power out, then it's all done. And you're like, well, who would put a server under the desk? How many of you were around with SharePoint 2001? 2003? Okay, remember when WSS all came out and everyone stuck a WSS server underneath their desk? And they put stuff that everybody needed to get to? And then they would go home and turn off the computer. I can't get to anything. Okay, there you go. Okay, now layer 1 in the OSI model talks about how the actual electrical pulses get on the wire. That's what layer 1 is all about. It defines the physical specifications of the devices, typically cables. Okay, so what are the mediums? How do those electrical pulses go through? They go through copper wire. Okay, so this thing right here, this network cable, everybody's got them, right? And we called them Cat 5, remember? Category 5 cable. Okay, in a Cat 5 cable, how many wires are in there? 8. Okay, of those 8 wires, how many of them are used? 4. What about the other 4? I don't know. Has anyone ever tried to see what happens on the other 4? I know some of you have, but you did it in a different way. I'm going to call you out. How many of you have HBO? Really? Nobody's got cable? Okay, all right, maybe not HBO. How many of you have cable TV? All right. How many of you get free cable TV? How many of you know how to get free TV? See, there you go. Okay? The other 4 in here carry the same amount of information as the other 4. Try it. How do you do it? Simple. You plug one end into the computer. You cut the other end of the computer off, right? You look at what 4 are on the other ones that are in there, right? The other 4 are plugged into the computer. The other 4 are not. Okay? So take the other 4, right? Split them off. So you got the 4 that are live that are sitting in the other computer. And then you got the other 4 that are not. Okay? They're not connected to anything else that are over there. So what you want to do is you take another one of these connectors, right? You put the 4 that are being used over there in one end. You put the other 4 that are being used in the other end. So you got 2 connectors on one cable. One of them is stuck into the other computer. Okay? And see what happens. It's interesting. You're like, wait a minute, but they're not being used. Jedi mind trick. Oh yeah, gold, same thing, right? Copper. If you go there and I cut my coax and I just split, there's twisted pairs all up in there and I split them off and I put a connector on both of them and I run one to the house that I stole it from, the other one to my house. Do I get cable TV? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called tapping the line. Okay, how else do I tap lines? I was going to do it here, but I didn't know. Okay, this is what I was going to do. How many of you have used, what is it, MSITI net or whatever it is, the wireless throughout this conference? Did anyone see an MSI net whatever 2? See, I was going to do that. I was going to bring a wireless access point. I was going to stick it over here, and in the SSID, I was going to change the name, and I was going to see how many I could catch. Put up a virtual machine with DHCP on there, give it some IP addresses, some static HTML pages for Google and Bing, and you would have thought, oh, I got internet access, and then just captured your packets. And it would have told me all kinds of stuff which we're getting ready to talk about. Okay? If you give me access to how you are doing stuff, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Okay? The medium, the cable, the server, that's where I'm going to get you. The air. If I take care of that and I grab it, it no longer belongs to you. Now, from a SharePoint perspective, what does that mean? Remember, if I take the server, any of those servers, because SharePoint seems to rely on everything. If I take the SQL server, you're done. If I take the main controller, you're done because you got no DNS, no way to authenticate, or just take the SharePoint server. You're done. Okay? So let's protect those things. Okay? Locks, cages, your laptops. Okay? Don't walk away from your laptops without locking them. I highly recommend and encourage, if you see someone's laptop open, send an email to their boss. If you don't know who their boss is, just go to randomly select people in their address book and say, I left my laptop open and I am now compromised. Thank you. We used to call it sheeping at Microsoft because we would have these images of sheep, and then we would send it out to the whole team with the picture of the sheep saying, "I like sheep." I'm not going to talk about the morality of the whole thing. I'm just saying. That's what we used to do. Lock your keyboard when you walk away. Okay, so let's suppose that I'm not really just a mischievous person. I'm a bad person. Okay? That means I could do all kinds of stuff. I could delete just stuff that you have on your hard drive. I can do all kinds of things. It no longer belongs to you because you let me have it. Unrestricted access. Okay? Law 2. If I tell you to, hey, you know what? Put this on your computer. Let me see what happens. All right? If someone says to put something on your computer, don't do it. Okay, now, as a SharePoint admin, here's a WSP. Go ahead and deploy this solution. Thanks for playing. What do? It came from our dev. How do you know it works? Well, it's my dev. I trust my dev. Okay, you can trust your dev if you want to. I want to see it. Open up the WSP, let me see what's in it before I start deploying this. Okay, if someone convinces you to deploy something on your infrastructure, guess what? It is now theirs. Okay, so I'm here to say that, you know what? Your SharePoint infrastructures belong to the developers because you're putting stuff on there that they created. Not to say that it's a bad thing, I'm just saying. Okay, so layer 2, MAC addresses. Okay, where are MAC addresses found? On your NICs. What are they? What is it used for? What is a MAC address used for? Anyone know? Okay, so everybody knows what an IP address is, right? Okay, how does it know where that IP address is on the network? Okay, that's what the MAC address is for. Okay, there's a protocol. DNS is used to translate host names into IP addresses. What translates the IP address into your physical location? That's your MAC address. Okay, the MAC address is found on the NIC, and it's unique. Okay, it's a hexadecimal thing, and it goes, you know, I think there's 10 of them, 10 digits, 2222, 22222. And it tells the network, okay, at this MAC address is where that IP address is. Okay. What does that mean about security? Well, if I have 2 of those MAC addresses on my network, what happens? Well, for those 2, nothing, right? Because there can only be one, because who's ever sending it says, oh, you know what? I need to send this bit of information to this IP address. I don't know where it is. The router's like, I got 2 MAC addresses. I don't know where to send it, and he drops the packet. Okay? Now, that's a bad thing, and it used to happen back in the late 90s. 3Com had sent some of their manufacturing sites to, I think it was a Korean factory, and they duplicated some MAC addresses. So when the NICs went out onto the market, and people would put these NICs into their machines, and it was like, these things don't work, and people would send the NICs back. Typically, it was because the MAC address was the same. Okay, now, virtualization, right, generates a new MAC address every time you spin up a VM. It's a brand new one, so it gets a new one. So it's kind of like, okay, that's cool. That helps increase the randomness of a MAC address. All right, so what does that have to do with security? Well, the protocols that it uses to determine what the IP address is for that MAC address is called ARP. Okay? If I cause too much ARPing on my network, okay, I can start poisoning some caches. I can say, well, you know what? The IP address for this is over here, but it's not. And sometimes, typically that happens on accident, but it can happen on purpose. Okay, ARP requests are broadcast traffic because he doesn't know who it is. Okay, it's not designed to really perform any type of validation, like an IP address can check and see if it is a duplicate. It says, you know what, there's a conflict, there's a duplicate IP address. ARP does not do that for MAC addresses. Okay, so if I'm looking at your wireless access point, right, and I'm going to hijack your session, I'm going to impersonate myself as you, because I want the traffic coming from you or from the SharePoint server. Okay, I may simply look at what's going on in a hub. Now, typically hubs don't exist anymore in the infrastructure. Almost everybody's got switches. So in that case, I may do a man-in-the-middle attack. Okay? My favorite, I learned about man-in-the-middle attacks when I was about 11 from a cartoon. Can't believe I'm admitting this, but yeah. Okay, so I was watching this cartoon. I think it was called Go Go Gophers, something, right? These are gopher guys. There were some Indians, and there was the cavalry, and it was back in the 1800s. And the cavalry wanted to keep the Indians out of the base and kick them off and so on and so forth. But the Indians were so much smarter than the cavalry guys, always had the cavalry guys running around in circles. Well, in one of the episodes, they came up with the telegraph. And the headquarters could tell the cavalry where the Indians were and so on and so forth, and they were just kicking their butt. And the Indians said, you know what, we need to cut these cables, or at least find out what they're saying. So they went up there, they grabbed part of the wire, they came down, and they reversed the directions, and they put it up, and the cavalry was running around in circles again. I'm like, ooh, that's cool. So all I have to do is get information, make sure the other person doesn't get it yet, and then so I tried it. Get in trouble at school, teacher says, take this note to the principal. What did I do? Rich has been acting up. Rich has been so good. Let him have the rest of the day off. Didn't work, but I tried it. Right? Hey, man-in-the-middle attacks. If I can alter the information coming from SharePoint to you or back to SharePoint, right, now you got a problem. Or if I can just interrupt that, right? How many times have you gone to SharePoint and you try to take a look at a site and you get this error message that says, cannot connect to configuration database? Anybody ever get that message? Cannot connect to configuration database? What was the first thing you did? You want to go right up to the top of the layer again, right? Layer 7, I'm going to IIS and I'm going to hit IIS reset. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Why? Because what's the problem? The error message just says I can't get there from here. Start down at the bottom. Is the SQL Server on? Because if the SQL Server is off, it's going to give you the same message. Is the SQL Server on? Yup. Okay. Is he online? I don't know. Go check it out. Ping it. Which is actually the next layer, and we'll get to that. But let's find out. If I can interrupt that information, I can give you cannot connect to configuration database all day. Or there's something else going on. Okay? If I've got a bunch of duplicate NICs on, right? Okay, here's a possible, not probable, but let's say I got virtual machines that are SharePoint, and now I got a bunch of duplicate Macs, and all of a sudden nothing works, and no one would ever get it. They were like, holy crap, what is going on? They'd reboot, and then that would actually fix it because it would get a randomized MAC address. So take a look at those things. Okay, so how would I secure that layer? How do I prevent man-in-the-middle attack? Okay, for if you're doing wireless, take off the default SSID. Make it hidden. Okay, sniffers. A lot of people put sniffers on the network for good reasons. Make sure that who's ever using those sniffers is authorized. You don't want people looking at what they shouldn't be looking at. Okay, and then ARP flooding, I think I talked about. If I'm constantly broadcasting a thing, I slow down the network and then I cannot connect to configuration database. Okay, so here's an example of when I sniffed the network. Okay, I was trying to figure out why I was getting this cannot connect to configuration database. But I found out something else along the way. Now, I don't know if you can see it very well, But on the left hand, this is just network monitor, right? This is nothing fancy, but I open up network monitor and I said, okay, you know what? Sniff everything. And then in the right-hand side, and the pane above, in the 1, 2, 3, 4th, fifth column there, it tells me there's a machine there, and it's telling me where it's going. And it says, okay, it got an IP address by DHCP, and I'm like, you know what? That IP address is not on my network. What the, and this is the person that's complaining they can't connect it. What is going on here? I do a little bit more searching, and I go over there, and on the right-hand side and the bottom, and I highlighted it, but you probably can't read it, but it says password null. And I'm like, holy crap, what the heck is this? And then I find out what the MAC address is, and it belongs to some wireless network that someone stuck under their desk, their own little MiFi. And guess what? It had no password on there. They just allowed anybody to connect to it. Well, okay, that's nice that you're being friendly, but guess what? That causes havoc for other machines that are laptops in the enterprise that may be going wireless, and they don't care. They, you know what? Boop. I'm just going to connect to that wireless right there. No security, no web, no nothing. I'm just going to connect. And now they can't connect to anything. It's all jacked up. So you know what I did? I said, okay, now I know what the MAC address is. I know that you've got no password on there. I go right to admin. Oh, guess what? Admin. Ooh, console. I broke that son of a gun. Broke it. That was a bad thing. But I still don't feel bad about it. Okay? Don't do that. If you're going to put wireless on there, put a network password on there. Okay? And you know what? We'll talk a little bit about how to keep machines from connecting to the wrong ones. Okay? Put strong passwords on there. If you've got encryption, put the strongest level of encryption on there. Okay? DHCP snooping. Okay? Make sure that you know who's giving out DHCP. With the advent of Windows 2000, they put on the authorization of DHCP servers, right? So I can't just put DHCP out there if it's not authorized in my Active Directory. Unfortunately, if I am the domain controller, I can put DHCP on there and authorize myself. And I was going to do that here, right? Now, I would have had a domain controller giving out IP addresses to you people and sending you to naughty websites. No, I wasn't going to do that, but yeah, that's sort of the things that you've got on there. I mean, how do you know if the DHCP server is giving out right IP addresses? Look at, run network monitor and just find out what, you will be amazed at what you see out there. Okay, if I can see what's going on, you've just invited me to the conversation. Okay, I'm going to send an encrypted email. Okay, where does encryption happen? Up here. Because as soon as it starts going down the stack, it starts getting broken up. And with a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, I know exactly what you're saying, if you allow me to. Okay, layer 3 is where networking is. Okay, so there are several sub-layers in the network layer. Okay, so sub-network access and then these convergence layers. Okay, routers are operating at this level, and routers typically use a couple protocols that we're pretty familiar with, IP and ICMP. Okay, we use IP addresses so that we know where we are in the network. What is ICMP used for? Anyone know? When you type in ping, right? Cannot connect to configuration database. First thing you need to do is ping the SQL server, make sure he's online. When you type ping SQL server, you get a response back. You hope you get a response back, right? That protocol that is used to send the response back is ICMP. Now, that's a good and bad thing. In some networks, they turn off ICMP. Why? I don't want you to know if I'm online or not. I want to be hidden. That's one layer of security, right? Security by obscurity. Don't make it the only layer, but it's not such a bad thing to have. Now, it's got good and bad, right? If I don't know if I'm out there, if I try to ping you and I can't ping you, I don't know if you're online. Okay, now there are other ways that you can get around that. For example, if you have, well, a lot of the enterprise servers, IBM and Dell, have an out-of-band solution, okay, called a rack or a RAS. So what it is a built-in NIC that is on a separate network that you can get access to, even if it blue screens. Okay, so if my server blue screen, I can get in through the rack and I can see the blue screen. Okay, it is totally underneath that layer. It's part of the firmware. So I can see that it's blue screen and I can remotely reboot it. Okay, I highly recommend that you get some sort of solution. There's a number of solutions like that. Okay, and that's part of those servers. Okay, now, back in the day, there was a thing called the ping of death. Okay, what was the ping of death? If I leave ICMP on, you're going to respond to my ping. That takes up a little bit of resource. But now let's say that I ping you like 5 times in a row, 10 times in a row, 100 times in a row. And the ping is typically 32 bits or bytes, 32 bytes. Let's say that I ping you with 156 bytes, 100,000 times. You're going to be pretty busy. You're going to be so busy that you're not going to be able to talk to anything. Someone's going to try to connect to their site. They connect to the configuration database. You go and make sure the SQL server is on. You reboot the server. The server comes back up. But guess what? The ping of death is still going on. He still doesn't talk, and you don't know what's going on. Now, there have been updates and service packs and all that that kill the ping of death. So it's not so much of an issue anymore, but there are other issues. What about other ports that are open? Okay, now, how many of you, let's see how many honest people we have ports that you are using that are susceptible to attack? Okay, how many of you are using the default 1433? How many of you don't know what I'm talking about? Okay, SQL Server. The default port is 1433. Okay? Bad. Okay? Use a different port. Simple. Doesn't take anything. You just create another port and client config, and you're done. Everything works the same. SharePoint doesn't care. Okay? But don't use the most common ports for that. Okay, unused open ports. There are other ports too that people like to attack, right? The RPC ports, 134, 135, right? If I keep banging on it, you know what? I can just make your processor go like this and then everything's all slowed down. Okay, I want to make sure that those unused open ports, no one can either talk to them, no one can see them. I want to stop those. I don't want to get a cannot connect to configuration database or make someone wait just because they want to get to an item in a list. I don't want them to see the packets that are going back and forth. Okay, that's where they're going to attack that layer. Okay? Another thing, they can use what is called enumeration. Okay, what does enumeration mean? That means I can go inside your computer and typically find some hidden share, and it will tell me what's in there. How do you know if you've got any of these? Well, let's say that I try to do a net use, right? I want to create a local drive, map drive, to some place on the network, right? I can use a net use, type in the IP address, and if I use the double quotes with nothing in the middle, that's a null session, I will get a System 5 error, typically. Okay, there's a free utility on the network, on the internet. It's called enum. Right? If I were to install that, okay, and I were to run, I would be able to connect to the IPC dollar share. Simple, right? IPC, everyone's got it. Okay, that's part of the operating system. Once I do that, it will tell me almost anything I want to know. What group policies that it's running, what the lockouts are on that particular server, And when I continue to run it, it will even tell me what shares are there. And it'll say, yep, this one's got the IPC dollar share. It's also got a couple other shares called share, docs, admin dollar, C dollar if you haven't turned that off. Hopefully you have. There is no anything dollar. Okay, so how do I protect against this particular issue? Okay, typically I can do it via a number of different things. I can use a group policy object that says, you know what, I'm not going to allow the enumeration of shares. Okay, I can use IPsec, which also by default doesn't allow that, and it's real simple. Okay, I can enable IPsec through a GPO. I just type in the MMC, add that snap in. In this particular case, I'm turning off ICMP. Just add your rule, you click next, 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 finish, and you're done. That simple. And then you just assign it. Even a caveman can do it. Okay, some of the benefits. Okay, now the reason why I put this on here is that a lot of people have a requirement that the data that goes along the wire cannot be inspected, which is good, but how do you do that? So they've come up with all kinds of third-party tools that will inspect traffic that are over the wire and then either keep people from looking at it or it will encrypt it. The operating system does that. Okay, if I put IPsec on there, it will encrypt it. You just have to make sure that whoever is receiving it is also using IPsec. Okay, if everybody's using IPsec, we're happy, holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and no one can look at what's going on. Okay, so to prevent this, on your routers, you can use the no IP directed broadcast. You may want to drop ICMP, you may not. Okay, using IPsec or network policy. Okay, what is network policy? Basically what happens is when a machine logs onto the network, I really like this. It looks at it and says, you know what? Do I recognize your MAC address? If I don't, I put you over in timeout. Do I recognize your IP address or MAC address? Yep. Okay. Is there any other policies that may prevent you from doing what you need to do on the network? Yes. Timeout. If no, all the way until, all right, I'm going to allow you to make a connection. See, we're really good at doing this from outsiders, right? If I have an internet-facing SharePoint site, I put all kinds of security on the outside, right? I've got my firewalls, I've got my DMZ, we're really good about that, but we don't do anything about the inside. Like I said, we may have an HR issue, and HR is not technically able to stop all that. So that's your job. Let's make sure that the people on the inside are doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it. And it doesn't take that much more effort. If I know what you're using, I may be able to stop you. Okay? If I can alter the operating system, it doesn't belong to you. Now, why would I want to why would anyone want to alter the operating system? It's not so much that I want to change it. It's just that I'm being nosy. Right? I want to see what you're doing. I want to know how you're doing it. Okay? I can stop that. Okay? Now at layer 4, which is where the connection-oriented protocols reside, which is TCP, okay, that is, it's a larger protocol, but the transport layer keeps track of the segments, and then they retransmit those so that it provides the next layer up, which is the session layer. That's what starts the session. So if I know what your operating system is, and I just want to play with you, kind of like with that guy who's in the network team that sat across from me, if I know what your window size is, and I change that, you may have intermittent network problems. Okay, so if I put routers between my network segments, and I use private IP addresses within my internal network, I'm probably pretty good. Okay, I can also use SSL. Test your network. Okay, some routers have fingerprint scrubbing, so I can't tell what your IP addresses are that are on there, because Most of the things that happen inside a network are done by the network guys because they can see everything. Okay? Okay, so if I alter your OS kernel, right, I can change the IP, time to live. I can modify your registry entries if you have a Windows system. I can change the banners on network applications. You know, you shouldn't be using Telnet on your servers anyway, or FTP, but, you know, you may. So I want to make sure that I scrub what OS is there, so I don't know how to get to it. Okay, so, Law 5. If someone has access to see what's going on, unrestricted, right, that network doesn't belong to you anymore. Okay, you don't want them to put anything on that wire. You don't want them listening to someone else. You don't want them impersonating them as you. You don't want anyone impersonating anyone else as them, because if you allow that, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Okay, the sessions. Okay, sessions between hosts. If I get out of session, right, and the session is terminated early, I get a problem. If I'm uploading something to SharePoint and the session gets terminated, you know, hey, I get that big error page that go back to site. And I got to go back and do it again. Okay, so I want to make sure that all the sessions that happen there, you know, I think in my experience what has happened is when someone gets a brand new laptop, this is where the issues are. They get a brand new laptop, they get Windows 7 on there, okay, and IT gets the laptop and said, you know, we're going to make this just like part of our network. Now, if some of you are network people, you should be going through this and making sure that the window sizes are exactly right, that the duplexes are set exactly the way they are, because if they're not, that's where layer 5 has some issues. Okay? Are my routers using full duplex? Then this should be using full duplex. If I'm using half duplex, then this should be using half duplex. If I'm using simplex, then this one should be using simplex. They have to be the same. Make sure that everything is the same. Use a template for all the machines. Now, in some organizations, they have a number of different laptops. Okay? If you've got a bunch of different laptops, then your NICs are probably configured differently because they're probably part of the motherboard. You need to go in there and check it out. Okay? Session hijacking, it typically doesn't happen that much, but you can. But the most common happens with DNS poisoning. Okay? And DNS poisoning, typically in a network, let's say that everybody's a good guy. You don't have any bad guys. You don't have any HR issues. Typically what happens here is on accident. DNS poisoning. How does that happen? How many of you set up your DNS? Okay. Now, when you set up DNS, what's the default? Because if I'm internal, right, and I want to get external, none of my DNS servers are authoritative for anything on the internet, right? So what do they have to do? They have to send the request out to another DNS server. They have to do DNS forwarding. Okay, what's the default setting for that? Right, I want to trust anybody. Right? If I ask you who www.bing.com is, I don't know. I want to, you know, where should I go to ask? Well, go to that server. Okay. Is he going to trust that server? Typically, it's to your external DNS server. Okay, your external DNS server may or may not know, right? It may have cached it, it may not have. Let's say that he doesn't. He's going to go and he's going to find out from what DNS server, Bing.com, or who the authoritative server for Bing.com is. Okay. But he may or may not get the correct answer. Here's a way that you can test it. Okay, if you were to go on your laptop and go to that link that you see up there, bad.keytil.foreign.name, whatever, okay, this is a pretty good test. What happens is once you go there, it's going to say, okay, I want you to go to www.example.com. If you get a link, or if you get a page that says RFC 2606, your DNS is set up okay. If you get a page with big red letters that says poisoned, you messed up. Not that he did anything. It's just that your DNS is not set up right and you are susceptible. Okay, a number of years ago, they poisoned one of the root DNS servers on the internet. If you go in there and you look at your root servers on their DNS, it goes like 1 to, or A to, I don't know, like K or whatever. Oh, it's farther than that. It may even be R. But M, which was the root server for the area where I lived in the United States, got poisoned. And every time you tried to go to Microsoft.com, you got like some website selling t-shirts or something. Right? And there was nothing you could do about it. Okay? Because once you found out what the IP address was, Microsoft didn't want you going right to the IP address, so they would always change it, so it was a mess. So what is happening here in this test, right? So when you go to bad.ketil.whatever.name, what happens, the name server that is authoritative for that URL is going to ask, okay, or you go there and you say, hey, you're the authoritative server for .name. What's the IP address? The response is to delegate that the authoritative answer to bad.ketil.name. And he's going to send it to www.example.com. That's okay. That's fine. That's what you want. In addition to that delegation, what's going to happen is that it's going to include an IP address for www.example.com. That is not okay. Okay, what you want is the name of the server that is authoritative, not a different or random IP address. Because if you are poisoned, what will happen is you will go to an IP address, which is the site that's got the big red letters that says poisoned on it. So what he did was, he said, here's the name of the authoritative server for example.com, and here's its IP address. That's a lie. That IP address sends you to the poisoned page. Your DNS server should reject the IP address and should go right to the name. Okay, when you set up DNS, you should be saying to DNS, when you configure it, only accept updates from this server and that server and no one else. Because that's not the default. Okay, so securing it. Okay, make sure your authentication protocols are used wisely. Make sure that DNS is configured. Make sure that the authoritative DNS servers are specified, not any. There should not be a blank field in that DNS configuration. Okay, moving up to layer 6. Okay, the presentation layer is basically the translation. Okay, so it's responsible for looking at a format and saying, you know what, I know what that is, I don't understand it, but I know how to translate it. Okay, that's what that layer is. Okay, where did they attack? Net BIOS names. Okay, that's where the IPC dollar is. Net BIOS names, now there's a issue. How many of you use WINS on your network? Okay. How many of you heard that you should disable NetBT over TCP? Net BIOS over TCP? No one's heard that? Okay. If you do that, you will break SharePoint. Okay, that is bad advice. I've even heard Microsoft give that advice. It's wrong. Okay? Do not disable NetBIOS over TCP. Okay? I can't think of a major application server that Microsoft makes that does not use NetBIOS. SharePoint uses it, Exchange uses it, SQL uses it. They all do. You don't need WINS, but it uses NetBIOS. Okay? Some of you who do have WINS or use NetBIOS naming conventions inside your network, you may have an issue in that if the name of any of your servers is longer than 15 characters, you may have issues. Because what happens with wins? It truncates it, right? So I worked in an enterprise that had a naming convention where the first two letters told you what kind of a server it was, the next 3 letters told you the location, and then the next 3 letters were the number of the server. So if it were an Exchange server in Chicago and it was the 453rd server, it was EX CHI 457, for example. All right, fine. In some cases, some of these, and the way they did that was so that, you know what, we know how long each name is going to be. It's not going to get any longer because they used wins. Okay? So none of the names are going to be any longer than, I think, 9 characters until the day they hit 1,000 domain controllers. Yeah, they were one forest, one domain, single domain. 1,100, they ended up with 1,300 domain controllers. They were worldwide. Sun never sat on this enterprise. So there were domain controllers everywhere. So then they broke that out, right? All of a sudden now I've got, 1299, and now I've got to add something. What kind of a domain, what is it? It's a domain controller, it's a DC. Okay, we're gonna have to come up with something else because we see that we're expanding. But once I start doing this and their application servers got into the tens of thousands, I got a problem. With SharePoint, SharePoint is going to take the truncated name and put that into the configuration database. You wonder why your search doesn't work? Because he can't find the server. He's trying to crawl this server that's got a tilde in the name, and that's not his name. I blogged about this and I sent that in. I think there's a TechNet article that says, you know what, if you got wins, make sure that you register the DNS name, not the wins. And look in the configuration database for that because you're going to have problems. Okay, so how do I make sure that no one can do a number of these things? Okay, for the null sessions, for the wins truncated names. Some of these things are done by default in Windows Server 2008 R2. If you are using Windows Server 2008 prior to R2 or Windows Server 2003, check these registry settings. Okay, the default should be 1. In some cases, prior to R2, the default is 0. You want to change that. Okay? When you change those, then that will prevent anyone from being able to do a number of things. They won't be able to create that null session. So that enum thing that I showed you, that won't work. All right, so kind of wrapping this up in the last few, okay? Absolute anonymity or security by obscurity. That works okay if it's part of your overall strategy. Don't think that just because it's hidden that no one's going to find it. Okay, at the top is where we typically deal with SharePoint security. Okay, it interfaces with all the applications. This is where we are probably most comfortable and most familiar. But where are the attack services? Well, all of those right there, right? DNS, FTP, SMTP. You shouldn't be running some of these, right? FTP should not be run on your SharePoint servers, Telnet, so on and so on and so forth, because that's where they're going to go. Okay, when I do health checks, I come into an enterprise and I say, hey, can you make sure that we're secure, that everything's working? First thing, well, not the first thing, but one of the first things I'm going to look for is how many other services do you have running? Why is this running? You have FTP turned on here? Really? You got Telnet up on here? Really? Oh, look, $. Fail. That'll be $100,000, thank you. Okay, how do I secure those? Okay, GPOs. I like group policy objects. They work very nicely. Okay, block software installation. Some of you were probably wondering, how do I stop someone from using SharePoint Designer? Okay, SharePoint Designer, out of the hands of your developers is an evil thing. Oh, let me go over here to this site. I don't like the way that looks. I wonder if I could change the view. Oh, let me open up SharePoint. They don't know what they're doing. They don't. So stop it. How do I stop it? Use a group policy object. You know what? If you see SharePoint Designer on someone's laptop or workstation, remove it. Very simple. Okay? Block the misuse of accounts, right? These accounts can only be used, and I think I'll talk about this in a minute, right? Your service accounts. How many of you have a service, your farm account has the word farm in it? Don't lie. It's called SP Farm or SVC Farm. Something, right? Change the name. Make sure that no one can log on with it, right? You should not be logging on with the farm account. You shouldn't be doing anything with the farm account. It is not to be used. It's a service account. Make sure in a GPL that account cannot be used, has no RDP access, can only be used on those servers. Let's say you've got a 7-server farm, right? I got 3 web front ends, 2 application servers, and a SQL server, whatever. Those are the only servers that service can run. Can't do anything else outside of those servers. GPO. Okay? Use NAP, Network Access Protocol, right? I can't just jack into the network. I don't want anybody just coming up into my house, causing havoc. All right? I got a t-shirt. You know that t-shirt says, when mama's happy, nobody's happy? For all the females that are like network and SharePoint admins, I get them that t-shirt. Right? If she ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Don't let anybody up into your house, causing havoc. IPsec, secure host-to-host and host-to-server communications. Best practices for service accounts. Make sure they've got strong passwords. Okay, that is like the #1 simple rule. Weak passwords are bad. I'm going to make a confession. Long time ago, when I was a peon, I'm still a peon, but I was a little peon then. I'm a big peon now. Okay, I wanted to get access to a network resource. They wouldn't let me, only the network admin. That was wrong. I felt. I need access whenever I want access. Trust me, your users feel the same way. Why do I always have to go to this person to get access? Why can't I just get access myself? Okay, so the guy sitting across from me was the admin. Greg, what's the password to this? Now, how many of you have asked what the password was to a certain resource and it was given to you? Okay? Breach. How many of you have given the password when you were asked to give it, to get access? Breach. Should not happen. He wasn't going to give it to me. I got upset. So I sniffed the network. To this day, I remember the username and password. Tolstoy 3, Jumanji. What happens when they get the admin password? You shouldn't be giving it out because what's the first thing they're going to do? They're not going to give themselves permission. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to give myself permissions. You don't want to do that. Why? Because now they know who it was. You take the admin account. I'm trying to tell you how to hack now. Okay. You take the admin account and you create another account. And you give that account admin access. And then what do? Then you go to that account, you log in, and you create another one. And you use that one. Because now they don't know. So, what does that mean? 2 things. One, if you're the admin, you should be auditing the creation of admin accounts. Number 2, if you are not the admin, you should be telling your admin to check for the creation of admin accounts. Okay? Create another account for your SharePoint service accounts and disable them. Because in the event that something happens, right, you didn't configure it right and you need to use a different one, there it is, all ready to go. Okay, weak passwords are a bad thing. Okay, your service accounts. Okay, your system is only as trustworthy as the admin who created them. Okay, you've got a number of different accounts. The setup account, okay, a number of you that are setting up SharePoint, you create an install account, right? A setup account. As soon as it's done, you should be deleting that account. Right? I set up SharePoint, I run the binaries, I run through the farm configuration wizard. Once I'm done, SharePoint's up, everybody's happy, delete, gone. Okay, the farm account, no one should be using it. Right? It's got a purpose, and that's it. Now, should it be an admin account? No. That is a big misconception. The farm account's got to be a local admin. No, it does not. In one case, that's it. But after the profile, after the user profile is set up and provisioned, I wish I had my SharePoint farm. After it's provisioned, you can remove it from the local administrators group. After it's provisioned. But when you are provisioning it, it has to run under the context of a local admin. But once it's done, it's good. Okay? It's good. Now, it should not, and that's the only case that it has to have local admin. When I have a farm account and I am provisioning the user profile sync service. As I'm doing that, it has to run under the context of local admin. Okay, the application pool. Okay, another account that people seem to misuse. Okay, make sure that no one is using that account. Okay, and then the SQL Service account as well. Make sure that it can only be used on that server. Okay, SQL Server service account, SharePoint setup user account, and the farm service account. Of these three, the second one, the setup user account, can be deleted after you're done with the install. Okay, as least amount of service accounts as I've got, the better. Okay, a good friend of mine, Microsoft, Todd Carter out of Texas. He's a Microsoft Certified Master Instructor, okay? Says that he is able to use one account for everything. He's able to get it down to that. It's not a best practice, but he's been able to do that. He created one, the farm account. He used it as the setup account once he was all done, used it as the setup account and forgot about it and let it go. Okay. Okay, some rights will change. Okay, because that became the system account. So be careful with those. Okay, whatever your weakest link is, that is what's going to fall first. Every time. Okay, and your server's not going to go down at 8 a.m. It's going to go down at 3:17 a.m. on Friday. And something's going to happen, and I mean, it's just ugly. Okay, so make sure that you have followed the OSI model all the way up to secure your machines. Now, just throwing technology at a problem is not the answer. Matter of fact, I am a SharePoint guy. I love SharePoint. I use SharePoint in my house. Okay, how do I use it in my house? Okay, I use it for my kids' homework. Okay, all of their books are online. All their homework is in PDF files, writable. Upload, everyone's got their own document library. I put workflow on it. When the kids go in, they do their homework, they check it in. Kicks off a workflow. At 4:03 p.m. Pacific time, I get an email, lets me know if the homework is done. If I don't get that email, Rachel can't go to Sally's house. or Soraya can't go to the ball game, or Rebecca, whatever. Okay, and I can tell. Can I go to here? I didn't get a workflow. The SharePoint server is down. No, it's not. Okay, so there's no one that loves SharePoint more than me. I used it because I had an issue. I travel fairly often. My kids aren't doing their homework. I need to make sure they do their homework. I threw technology at it, and it doesn't solve the problem, but it really makes it a lot better. Some of you who are using SharePoint may not really need it. Your CEO saw it in the back of a magazine on a plane and said, SharePoint, I think we need SharePoint. And put SharePoint in, and there you are. Okay? Technology's great. Technology's wonderful. That's why we're here. But it is not the silver bullet for all things, especially in security. So, here they are in a nutshell. The 10 immutable laws of security. I took out the SharePoint on purpose because it applies to all technologies, not just SharePoint. So, in closing, what I would like to say is do an overhaul. Take a look. It doesn't take that much more energy to find out where your weakest link is. Pretend you're a bad guy and try to see where you're weak. Create some bogus account on your network, make sure you get authorization, and just try to log on with it at somebody's laptop and see if you can get the SharePoint. They shouldn't be able to. Okay, see if you can get to your SharePoint infrastructure from outside. You shouldn't be able to unless you've been authorized. Okay, how many of you have a dev environment? That's perfect to test. See if you can bring it down. If your dev environment can absolutely not be down, it's not a dev environment. You should be able to bring the dev environment. The dev environment should be flexible and fluid and, you know what, unreliable. That's why you're developing stuff. QA, that's different. Staging, that's different. But dev should follow best practices for its setup and function, but hey, this is where I want to start blowing stuff up and seeing if it works. Testing your security is perfect for the dev environment. See where you are weak. Once you find out where you're weak, fix it to the best ability. Remember, SharePoint security, find your happy medium. Once you found out what your happy medium is, enforce it. Okay, so it says I've got, I thought I had like 5 more minutes. It says I got 40 seconds. So I'm going to end this, but can I take, I don't even know who I'm talking to. I just see like this dark void. Can I take a few questions anyway? I don't hear anything, so I'll just say that's yes. So what questions might you have for me? Anyone? Yes. Yes. Not on the client, on the server. You don't want your server acting as a telnet server. Client's fine because it's the one that's making the request to a telnet server. You don't want anyone coming in. Uh-huh. So the question is, I am in a network which is pretty tight, and I would like to understand a little bit more about how these policies are applied using Network Monitor. What resources do I have in order to understand how to read those? There was an old Microsoft, I would recommend the Microsoft Learning booth here at TechEd and ask them about mock course 689. That course actually has a number of modules on reading network monitor outputs. And there might have been another one, but that one for sure. And there's some virtual labs online, TechNet virtual labs that go through that. And so what happens is it'll say, okay, this is what you're looking at. This is what the packet is saying. So that might help you out. Anything else? You don't remember the course numbers? I guess that red light means I need to go. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and enjoy the conference.